Thank you, everyone, for joining me today on this episode of Elisha Space. I'm very excited to be able to have this conversation with Yuri Mellow. We're going to be talking about how the connection of integrating spirituality, your faith, integrates positively with your mental health and what that can look like. So, let me begin by just kind of briefly sharing with you just a little bit about Yuri Mello. And Yuri, if I missed something, please um, forgive my head because my heart means well. Okay.
Already forgiven. I love it.
Thank you. So he's been a licensed therapist for over 20 years. And he is the author of two books, Mind Over Gray Matter and Know Thyself. These books are primarily written for our young people, for our teens. And he's gotten different types of awards for the work that he's done. He is the co-founder of School Pulse. And I'll let him share a little bit more about what School Pulse is, but it's really designed to inspire our youth and to provide them with resources to live a more healthier, more joyful lifestyles. So, Yuri, I want to thank you for joining us on Elisha Space and having this very impactful conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have.
Elisha, I'm really excited. Thanks once again for allowing me to be here. I'm grateful to talk about that intersection, right? Potentially between kind of psychology, our mindset, and of course, um, our spirituality, right? Our potential for divinity. I'm really excited about that. I think that that's a topic that is always kind of percolating in my mind a little bit. And then, of course, like I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about School Pulse or my professional experience. I think the work we're doing there with schools, with districts, with states is absolutely just fabulous. And so, yeah, let me know when you want me to jump in, and I'll give you a little bit of a genesis story there of kind of how that came to be.
Okay. I think those things will merge organically as we talk. You know.
Agreed.
All right. So, how would you define the impact of faith in the context of mental health?
You know, I've been a therapist now for about 20 years. Yeah, 20 plus, I guess a little bit more than that, but I've just been honored, honestly, is the best way for me to say it, to just sit knee to knee, eyeball to eyeball with people, right? And in a very small way, to be a part of their life, like their joy, their successes, their struggle, their suffering. And my goal has always been um, to provide not only strategies and skills, but to provide people with a measure of truth, right? And in private practice, that can be challenging at times. Challenging because, well, I say challenging meaning I really just want to provide people with the kind of information that fits within their own belief system or their own personal philosophy, right? And I'm certainly not there in therapist or as a therapist. I'm not preaching, right, my own belief system. Although there are quite a few of those elements that do make it into my daily conversation. Let me give you one, for example. And this is not an unknown principle, I think, in psychology or even kind of in growth mindset psychology, but it's been one that I believe has been, for example, in Christianity, it's one that's been around for a long time. And it's the simple, I actually feel like this is such powerful and transforming doctrine. And when I say doctrine, I just mean kind of a set of ideas or beliefs like that ultimately, if we adopt, can transform our lives. And doctrine, I guess, when I suppose I'm talking about potential truth, right, with a capital T, truth.
Mm-hmm.
Not just like my truth or my authenticity. We're talking about potentially the idea that there is an objective truth, and that when we tap into that, right, as John would say, right, that truth can actually set us free in a sense, right, and not necessarily free from a jail cell, but potentially free from some of the challenges and suffering that we'll experience in this world. But this idea that I'm talking about, which is one that I share all the time, it's a simple idea, but it's just the simple concept that the things that happen to us in our lives, right, can be consecrated for our good, right? They
Right.
can be, all these things shall give us experience and be for thy good. Whenever I tell that to people, and I'm talking about, people who have experienced, mild trauma all the way to extremely severe trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people about that in a gentle way. I prepare them. I'm never attempting to minimize their suffering or their circumstance and just kind of placing like, hey, like all of this happened for your good and there's a meaning and this can make you holy, right? That's what the meaning of the word consecration is that it can somehow, we can take an experience and we can make it sacred or holy for us. And we believe that not only psychologically, but we actually believe that has some spiritual ramifications, right? So, for example, within Christianity, and I can't speak for other religions specifically, within Christianity, right, we believe that the reason or the process by which that consecration or that process of making something holy for us is done through Christ, right? His love,
Right.
his passion, his sacrifice, his atonement for us is what makes that possible. And so that's one of those concepts that whenever I'm dealing with people who have gone through and are going through or are in the middle of severe challenges, is this concept, right? Is this powerful, powerful perspective, right? Hopeful and optimistic perspective that somehow these events and circumstances can create something meaningful,
Right.
powerful, and ultimately joyful for them. Um, man, I just feel like that's such a critical piece. And so whenever we're talking about that intersection, right, of spirituality and psychology, right, I think this is a great concept that more and more, right, I think with the advent of positive psychology or growth mindset psychology, right, and specifically when we're talking about things like optimism or creating a sense of hope in people, I feel like that's what religions or religious communities have been doing now, all the way from Christianity to Judeo to Muslim congregations that have been doing for the longest time, right? We talk about this concept of not just kind of a vague or abstract hope, but a what Paul would say, kind of in the New Testament, right? A lively hope. I actually love the way he says that, right? Think about that idea, right, of creating within us a lively hope, right? So once again, not fake, but lively, something that lightens up our being.
Mm.
And so uh, I love specifically some of the research today, right? That not only connects some of these concepts, I think that religions and communities, I think religious communities have encouraged, but also there's some really interesting research right now that connects um, our communities, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the need and the benefit of religious communities. And let me give you an example of that too. And once again, a little bit more of that intersection. And please, Elisha, just stop me at any point because
No, keep going because this is
okay,
I did a piece on this, and
awesome.
everything you're saying now mine leans towards, also leans towards the Christian faith because I'm a Christian, so it's easier for me to kind of tap into that. So but and our podcast, this podcast, when we talk about faith, it leans towards the Christian faith. So, but I also think it's applicable to other, people that practice different faiths. But No, I agree with you completely because everything you're saying aligns with the research I've done and the pieces I've written about this. So, no, you go right ahead. So,
Yeah, thank you. I was actually just going to share specifically, right, when it comes to, for example, think about connection, right?
mhm,
And I think one of the facts that I think your listeners will want to know, for their own personal life, religious or non-religious,
right.
I would say that the most important factor, if you want to think about, ways of being or experiencing more happiness and joy in your life, and the most important factor of short and long-term happiness in someone's life are positive relationships, right? And I know that that's,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I know that that's probably, kind of like, well, yeah, we kind of know that, but that's important, right? It's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, for you as an individual, for you as a mother or a father or a professional, whatever it is, my goal for people is always to invest, and nurture those relationships, because that is the most important factor in your life that will, by the way, not only help you to experience more joy. In fact, there's a great quote that I hope I can remember it all the way through, but it says something to the effect of positive relationships multiply your joys and divide your sorrows. And I'm sure that you've probably heard that, but
Hmm.
that's actually true. Like like a really nice quote. And I love quotes, right? Because there are these tiny little nuggets of just like goodness and power that can move us and inspire us. And there are some quotes that are actually right that I think speak to that T with a capital truth with a capital T. And I believe that that is one. And the research actually suggests that, right? When we have individual relationships, or I would say within individuals who fortunately for them are engaged in communities of faith, right, or other communities or groups, um, those are the kinds of things that can insulate them and protect them from trauma, from suicide, and even from mental illness and suffering. Like the data there is, it's actually quite interesting uh, about how those positive relationships actually alter our perception of things.
Hmm.
I think one of the pieces of research, I don't recall the exactly where I got it from, but if you can just imagine, right, you kind of looking up and you see a big mountain, right, or a hill, right, and when you look at that by yourself, compared to when you look at that same mountain with someone that is close to you or is a friend to you or that you have a positive relationship with, when you're with that person, you actually believe that you are more capable of climbing that mountain or enduring that, right? And so not only is our suffering diminished, but our optimistic mindset is increased when we're around those people. And so for me, like I've been fortunate enough, right, to been involved. I mean, ever since I was a young boy, in what I feel is a robust and active community of saints and people, right, and just people that are just normal people. By the way, like we're not talking about extraordinary human beings. I mean, I think that they are, but we're just talking about. In fact, I'm thinking of like Nelson Mandela's words, right, when somebody said to him, Mr. Mandela, you're a saint. And he said, well, if you consider a saint someone who is sinning but keeps on trying, right? And
Hmm.
sure enough, like I think that's what we're talking about. But I happen to be incredibly fortunate to live amongst people that on a weekly basis, and of course on Sundays, like that I see and I
Hmm.
engage with and I interact, and we do things for each other in our community. We feed each other. We meet together. It's just been a tremendous advantage in my life. And I'm just incredibly grateful for that. And honestly, even in School Pulse, I mean, obviously we're presenting or providing this content to adolescents and teens throughout school. And we can't specifically tell them, right, to, go be part of a faith-based community. But I often talk about, right, or encourage those teens to be involved, not just number one at their school participate. I feel like one of the struggles that youth are facing right now is it's like the disease of like the no. Like they're just like,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not my thing. No, I just don't want to do it. No. And honestly, it's probably not a new thing. Like I think probably as adolescents, we all probably dealt with that. Constantly tell my teens that I work with, and I just love adolescents, but I just say, man, this is the year of yes. Like just yes. If it's good, if it's adventurous, if it's fun, if it's challenging, if it's good for your mind, for your body, for your soul, the answer is yes, yes. And so that's one of my encouragements constantly, right? Is number one is invest in your positive relationships. Number two is just say yes to participating in things
Mm-hmm.
in school, in your home, in your community, in your religious organizations. The answer is yes, go, and your life will be blessed, short and long term.
I think about that scripture in Hebrews where it says, do not forsake the gathering of the assembly. And I think part of the reason for that is because an assembly can look like you going to a place of worship every Sunday, or it can also look like a life group that you, or a house church that you might be part of. But it can look different, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But that those connections are so impactful and so powerful, I believe, because sometimes you can have just a horrible week. And sometimes somebody meeting you with a smile and saying, how are you doing? Or it's nice to see you. It gives you a sense of community and you're like, okay, I can do this another week, or I can get through this. So I think it's a powerful, powerful thing to um, be part of a community of like-minded individuals, especially if you're having challenges and you're needing that support, um, and you're needing that type of support. And then, like what you're saying with the teens, like a lot of times I think that is something that absolutely has to happen, is that connection with one another. Um, with that connection with one another is so vitally important, um, as far as building that with one another. I'm also of the opinion that that connection within faith and resilience also helps to build emotional resilience when you're having some challenges. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I would, right? So I think, I mean, I'm even thinking of like Arthur Brooks, who I cannot remember the book that he wrote. He actually wrote it kind of in association with Oprah Winfrey. But he is a Harvard professor, and basically teaches kind of what I think what he calls it the science of wellness or the science of happiness class.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he kind of boils things down to, and I think he's very involved. I think in his faith. I think he's. Uh, I believe that he practices Catholicism and sees great value in that, and that's something that he particularly, encourages individuals, right, to do. And he kind of calls it, faith, family, and friends as kind of these three pillars, right, of just for a happy life. And he talks about a few other things as well. But I I just see and more impressed. Honestly, the older I get, and the more detail I know, the more I'm engaged, the more impressed I am with these communities of faith and the giving um, that just happens there. Like, I mean, I'm thinking within my own faith, in addition to the time that we spend together, say on a Sunday, but every Tuesday or Wednesday. I mean, just think about this. Like, we have a group of very busy and overwhelmed adults who are trying to provide for their own family and manage their own life and circumstances. But every week, they are giving of their time to provide rich experiences for children and adolescents, all the way from just playing basketball to rock climbing to going on a hike to doing a little, bonfire at their house, or a cookout, or to go swimming somewhere, or to go to the lake, or and just think about that. Like, how cool is that, right? That, like, I look at my own life, Elisha, and I'm honestly overwhelmed is probably the word that would come to my mind. Uh, I mean, I'm a married man. I have 5 kids, and even though I've got, 4 of them that have kind of like, I've moved on. I've got, one that's married, one that's, kind of doing her first big girl job, is what she would say. She's working at a school. And then I've got 2 other children who are actually engaged in kind of a humanitarian religious type mission service right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I've got, right now I've got one teenage girl at the house, and she's, does cheer at the high school. But obviously we're very involved with work, very involved in our community, involved in our religious community. And life is just tough. Life is tough. It's overwhelming. And so to me, I just see an institution, a community of good people who are trying to raise a better generation. I just think it's just a fabulous gift. And so I recognize that I think the data is interesting. I think that there's quite a significant amount of research right now that points to the fact that some of our generation is moving away from religious practice. Not all, but I think that there's been a move away from that. Some people have even looked at that as a potential for this kind of epidemic of loneliness that we've seen, that kind of compounded by, obviously, like, some of the technology that I think right now is creating some problems for us as adults, by the way, and then for our teens as well. But
Right.
I just think that it's powerful, and the evidence suggests that. And I think more and more, especially with the advent of kind of positive psychology, and looking specifically not just at kind of how mentally ill we are, but on what do we need to do to really live a good life that's full of joy, of purpose, and meaning. And to go back to your question, I believe that that's where religion really can come in with some powerful messaging about purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
About meaning in this life. We're not just these accidental beings, right? This cosmic dust per se, but we're more than that, right? We're beings with divine potential, right? What does Peter say? He says we can be partakers of the divine nature. And what a cool statement that is, right? That we could actually partake in that kind of divinity, not just here, but right, as kind of our Christian faith and others, right, would believe, right, that continues on, right, towards this concept of progressing eternally is just lovely. So
I'm going to pivot just a little bit,
let's go.
because you mentioned that exactly School Pulse, um, and the teens, there's community with that as well, correct?
There
Can
is.
you talk a little bit about School Pulse? And because I know the audience may not be aware about School Pulse and what that's about, in
I would
general.
I would love that. Yeah. So like I said, I've been a therapist for 20 years, and about 7.5 years ago, we honestly, Elisha, we live in just this fabulous little community here in southern Utah. We're about an hour and 45 minutes away from Las Vegas or so. And about 7 years ago, we had, in this area here where we live, we had 7 students who took their life by suicide at our middle schools and high schools.
No.
Yeah, and a principal who was a good friend of mine. I feel just a bright guy, guy who's willing to work the problem, who's innovative, who's not afraid to take steps. He had lost, in fact, my 2 older girls were going to that school at the time, but he reached out to me and said, honestly, Yuri, I feel like everything that I have at my disposal as a principal is reactive in nature. It's almost like I'm passively waiting for crisis to happen, and then I'm trying to intervene and try to make the situation better. And what he and I began to talk about was a way to be more proactive, right? a way to not just be focused on or waiting for crisis to happen, but to proactively engage in more preventative measures, right? And we all know that prevention is just better, right? I mean, it's commonsensical. And yet, even as an adult, right, I usually don't go to the doctor, right, until something is broken. So I
Right.
understand that we often work from within that medical model, right? The medical model of waiting until something is wrong and then trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But we felt like we could do something more at the school level. And so we actually began. And one of the things that we started with right away is we wanted to proactively engage students via text and provide them with encouraging content. I mean, and when we started, I mean, it was very, very small, and we still are very small. I mean, I still feel like we're a startup in a sense. But since then, we have developed. So what we do is when students engage with our service, right, and it's not an application, we literally go right to their text. We proactively text students twice a week, every Tuesday and Friday. We deliver our extraordinary videos that are just packed with fun, non-cringy, exciting content. And that's evidence-based, right, with positive psychology, growth mindset, and other things. And then when students engage back, and they do by the thousands, then we have a live team of trained professionals and paraprofessionals that assist, encourage, love, care for, and provide these fabulous resources to them. And so not only are we engaging and making the good better for them, but we're also obviously dealing with kids who come to us, right, over text, um, who are depressed, who are self-harming, who are dealing with body image issues, who are actively suicidal, who are reporting physical or sexual or other types of abuse. And they're fine. And it's easy, right? It's easy to text. It's private. It's accessible. And that's why our program, I think, has been so successful. Our goal, of course, is to connect those lovely children to their parents. Or to their guardians or to the professionals at the school. That's always our goal. But man, we are providing and just doing some extraordinary prevention and intervention and beyond that, because our texting service just continues. Elisha, if you can imagine, like we have students that have been receiving our optimistic and encouraging content for multiple years, like on their phone. It's just fabulous. We're extremely proud of that. And then, of course, in addition to that, we've come up with, we've listened to schools. We understand that they're overwhelmed. We feel like they're underserved. They're under-resourced. They tell us that they don't have time to meet with this whole youth mental health crisis that's going on. And honestly, our hope is we want to come to the rescue. Like we're coming to the rescue. We're providing text-based support. We're providing our awesome email campaigns. We're giving them tools at their school that match their need. And we're transforming not just individual lives, but as a whole, kind of that atmosphere and the environment of school, which matters so much. And so that's what School Pulse is. And we've been doing that now for 7 years. We're in a lot of the states throughout the country. We have individual schools that we contract with, districts that we contract with, and even states, right, that contract to put our service in every single one of their secondary schools. And so we just feel incredibly privileged. We're fighting our tails off because it's tough. It's tough to bring a program or a new service into a school because I think schools are already so overwhelmed and oftentimes feel like, well, this is just going to be one more thing that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we do it in a really unique way where we try to provide our services in ways that don't add burden to them, that actually relieve that. And when we meet with schools, we can show them exactly how we do that. So it's meaningful, it's powerful, it's proactive. We're not like fire extinguishers on the wall, right? Waiting for something to happen and then we break glass and we intervene. No, our goal is to proactively nudge kids with awesomeness. And we believe that our psychology is everything, right? The way that we perceive the events in our lives matters more than the events themselves. And that's why we're kind of nurturing them with these, really what I would say are evidence-based psychological principles, which I believe are actually quite rooted in some of the wisdom of the ages. And that, of course, includes some of our religious history as well. So I think it's just been fabulous.
I think this is amazing. I think it feeds into what we were talking about community and how the impact of um, faith and mental health and the important how it connects you with community. And our schools are a part of our community. They are a lot of times they are the heartbeat of our community. I remember, and maybe you were doing this too with your children. I would always consider what's the school system like, like what school, when I'm considering an area to move, I'm like thinking about what's the school system, you know, what's going on in that area because that's the heartbeat. Of the community. I have so many questions. Um, is this primarily in the United States? And do you get involved in like the weeds of these things with the schools? Like, do you get involved in the IEPs and things of that nature when you talk about your program?
Love that. Primarily now we're in the United States, specifically with our text-based service. It doesn't really work anywhere else. But our tools, a large majority of our tools, we now have kind of just a suite of services. I mean, they could easily be applied in other areas, whether it be Canada or the UK or English-speaking countries. We can provide our service in multiple languages as well. But we have formally not gone outside of this country to provide those. We're mostly kind of resting here in the US and providing those.
Hmm.
I've done quite of these kind of podcast presentations in Canada, and there's definitely some interest there as well. Um, but we're not serving any schools outside of the country. In regards to kind of being involved or kind of being in the weeds, that not specifically with IEPs, at least not directly as part of kind of that planning method, but we're certainly a part of that school's plan, right? To prevent student suicide, to
Right.
improve student wellness, to improve academic performance, to improve academic engagement or student engagement. And we do that in a couple of ways. Number one, through our proactive services that we provide to students, to parents, and to staff. But I think one of our coolest tools that we developed just this last year, what I call kind of our student success activities and our restorative practice activities. And basically what that means is, let's say you're a principal or a vice principal, right? And you've got young people in your school that are struggling with some sort of a disciplinary concern, right? All the way from fighting to disrupting the school environment, or they're missing class, or they're bullying other kids, or they're uh, you know, cheating, being dishonest, whatever it is. Like, I mean, these are issues, Elisha, that I was talking to a good friend of mine who was a vice principal who said, Yuri, this is what I do every day, all day.
Well,
Like, I'm
right.
constantly dealing with disciplinary concerns and issues. And some of these are
And
just
putting out
minor, right? I mean,
fires.
yeah, exactly. Like, these are kids, who are saying stuff on social media, and it's right. I mean, and it's just creating chaos, right?
Hmm.
And these principals and vice principals, right, have to provide sometimes, right, kind of a disciplinary or a piece of discipline. But most schools throughout the country are looking to go beyond just punitive measures, right? So it's important to teach, like, hey, don't do this. But I would suggest that it's just as important, or maybe even more, right, to say, do this instead.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so what we've done is we have created these restorative practice, right, activities. I think schools are familiar with that language, right? But that's what they're meant to do. They're meant to be corrective in nature and to get students back in class as soon as they can, instead of punishing them by taking them out of school. Our hope is, like, let's provide a corrective form of discipline that allows them to stay in school, provides discipline, and then put them back into the environment. So we've created these activities, once again, that are meant to be understanding, optimistic, educational, to teach those new skills and to get those kids back in class as soon as possible, instead of taking them out of the learning environment, where we believe that's where their best chances are. So
One more question, and then we
You
will
bet.
continue to wrap up because I love this. So,
Love it.
are these how confidential are these um, text messages as far as interactions are concerned, and how interactive are they?
Yeah, they're interactive live people. It's not AI. It's me sending you a text every Tuesday and Friday that says, "Hey, check out this video." For example, this one was um, it was we send our student success activities every Tuesday, and this one was just a short video on how to become a better student. Right? We usually try to match our content with the time of the year and kind of what's on
Mm-hmm.
students' minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so students will, and we are like, we engage all of our texts. We're not just dumping content. We're always trying to engage back with the students. And if you were to respond to that and say like, man, I'm just like so stressed, like already, right? I'm already falling behind in my classes. You would have a live person, right? That would respond back to you, Elisha, with or not Elisha, because we don't know your name. Now we'll talk about that in just a second.
Okay,
But they would
good.
say like, so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for telling us that. What's going on? How can we help? Right. And having that student communicate about that, we can actually provide them resources right over text, and of course encourage, right, that student to communicate that to their parents, to improve that relationship with their teacher, to communicate with their school counselors, so that we can systemically improve that situation for the student. So when students opt into our service, right, or they're opted into our service by the school, right, we don't know it. It's truly anonymous. Anonymous meaning like we don't know who the student is. We know the school that they go to, because each school kind of has their unique QR code or phone number that's associated. So we know that that student goes to that particular school, so that we can gather data specifically for that school. But we don't know who that student is. These are minors. We have laws that we have to abide by. We're not allowed to have their personal information. The only time that we try to gather personal information from that student is when that student reports that they're actively trying to harm themselves, harm somebody else, or they're reporting physical or sexual abuse. Then we do everything in our power, right, to gather information so that we can do a live intervention and assist this student in every way that we can. And Elisha, we have done thousands of those, of students who have reported abuse, inappropriate relationships, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, violence, shootings, etc. Like, we've been able to successfully intervene in those throughout the country. Some of our stories are honestly, they're like Nobel Prize winning. I mean, they're just fabulous. Uh, but honestly, I give that credit to teens, because they're just awesome. Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
just incredible. Like, they come to us and they're just willing um, to just be a part of our system. And we have just some really fabulous stories. So yes, anonymity is just who we are until they reveal something that needs to be reported. And then we try to gather information so that we can help that student receive some intervention right there where they are. It's
I
fabulous.
think this is an excellent program. It feeds into what we were talking about before about the importance of community and letting people know that you really care, because so many people, as you're aware as well, you know, feel like they're alone. And just to know that someone is out there that is with them, assisting them in their journey, that's everything. That's everything. Your books. Would you like to share some information about your books and where people could get them? I know that they're pretty much geared for the youth, which I think is
Uh,
great.
yeah. Well, the first two my two books, Know Thyself is particularly geared towards adolescents. Mind Over Gray Matter is more general. Like, I would say that that's
Okay.
more general for adults as well.
Okay.
But I wrote those, man, honestly, I don't even remember that. I was probably 13, 14 years into my practice. Um, and honestly, it was such a meaningful thing that I did in my life. It was so good for me to take these thoughts, these ideas, this experience, and to just get it out of here, out of my head, and to put it on paper and to give it shape. And I mean, they're available on Amazon. We'll provide some links on the show notes for you. But I think if you're looking particularly, right, about this idea, right, of using our minds, right, and we can even spiritually make some concept there kind of about our spirits, right, to impact our physical selves, right, which is the mind over gray matter, which is our ability to use our mind to train our brain to do better things, right?
Right.
And of course, know
That even
thyself.
goes into cognitive behavioral therapy, but yes.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's definitely built on that, but actually on that book, I have a lot more liberty to really talk about, some of these other concepts particularly. But, and then of course, know thyself. I actually really like the format of that book. I kind of wrote that book so that the chapters are very, very short, and they can it can be read, um, you know, out of order. Like, I mean, so you may look through the chapters and see like, oh, this is interesting to me, right? And you can go to it and you can read that, and each chapter is almost kind of its individual little parable or individual little nugget of information for them. So I really like that. And it was really made to just address the questions that teens have about life and to provide them with real responses. I actually will likely release another one by this Christmas. I call it this. It's kind of geared toward teens. It's called the 7 Disciplines of Happiness. And it's really, once again, I mean, it's my work with schools and with teens, but it's based upon the concept that happiness is the ultimate discipline, right? That is, and so I provide them with a mixture of not just these kind of positive psychology and growth mindset strategies, but also, right, some of these more other elements as well, including our own belief systems, our own faith, and the optimism that can be created when we have that sense of purpose and meaning in our lives. So that's just a little bit about my books.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, audience will have these things on the show notes. I want to thank you, truly thank you for for being on the show today and sharing the importance of faith, community, and how it's even expanded and school pulse, that sense of community, and letting people know, especially our youth, that we're there, that someone out there is there for them, that they're cheering them on, they're wishing them well, and they want to provide them with the resources they need to get to a healthier place. If someone wants to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Yeah, they can go to schoolpulse.org. You can find us there. You can actually email me individually. I'm at Yuri, and you can see my name is kind of strange. It's not an L, it's IURI at schoolpulse.org. And you can email me individually, and you can put that on your show notes as well. But let's talk, whether, individually and you're looking for some tools for your teens. I have some really amazing free content that I'll actually provide to you. We've put together, I don't know, probably 80 or 90 videos that are based on just what students need in high school. And we make that available totally for free for parents, for teens. Right now, we'll provide that for you. And of course, if you're a school district or state, you're looking to enhance and boost or bolster your suicide prevention efforts, the mental fitness of your students, wow, the evidence is rich, it's compelling, it's persuasive. Let's be proactive instead of reactive. That's the key.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So, audience, you have this information. I hope that you heard some nuggets from this podcast that helped in your own healing journey. And, I just wish the absolute best for all of you, that your world will become better and more prosperous, more peaceful, more joy as you listen to different episodes and as you move forward within your healing journey. Until next time.